Well, there has been a bit of Division news dropping lately. Firstly, Morten Ryberg, product director and part of the very small team that has been keeping the Division 2 moving forward, has decided after 17 years working with Ubisoft that it's time to move on. All he has said at this stage is that he'll be embarking on a new journey in a different industry. Personally, my interaction with Morten has been fairly limited, but I respect what he's been able to do for the franchise in his time working on the Division 2, and that his colleagues have always spoken very highly of him. So I wish him the best for the future, and to not be a stranger, we as a community seem to really hold on to devs, both past and present, so I hope he checks in from time to time. In other news, the Massive Entertainment Twitter account tweeted out that Julian Garrity has been appointed executive producer for the Tom Clancy's Division brand. Julian will oversee all games and products, including Tom Clancy's The Division 3, led by Massive Entertainment, who is actively building a team for the game. This is 100% the most casual way that they could have ever announced that The Division 3 is in the pipeline. These days it's more common for developers to reveal their upcoming games in the biggest way possible, with loud flashy trailers and numerous social media posts attempting to attract as much attention as possible. But apparently Ubisoft decided to forget about all that hype stuff and just slip it in there with a press release that spoke more to Julian's change of role than The Division 3 itself. It just seemed so blasé, like congratulations to Julian and Massive, and oh yeah, we're gonna make another game too. Speaking of sequels, my friends at Logitech have sent me through the latest in the Logitech Pro series. The Pro X Superlight 2 gaming mouse, the Pro X TKL Lightspeed gaming keyboard, and the Pro X2 Lightspeed gaming headset. I gotta be honest, I've been using the Pro X gear for a long time now, and I never had any complaints. So creating an ad for this seemed like a bit of a struggle at first. However, after using it for the last week or so, the Pro X2 gear just seems like a natural evolution. Think of it as trading in for the newer, lighter, faster, younger model. I mean, who doesn't want that?
So I can give you a younger brother a fold-in?
Well, I mean, obviously some things age like a fine wine or cheese, although maybe the smell's what she's referring to. But when it comes to the Pro X2 range, it does all the amazing things that the Pro X range does, but better. The mouse has gotten lighter and more precise. The TKL keyboard, with the upgrade of Logitech's Lightspeed wireless technology and up to 50 hours of battery life, and anyone who has been watching me for a while will know how much of a stan I am for the Pro X wireless headset. I run these bad boys on all of my systems. Well, to my surprise, the Pro X2 is a noticeable step up with its new G Pro graphene audio drivers, and it's even gotten a little bit lighter. The only downside is that I now need to sweet talk and maybe show some ankle to Logitech in order to convince them into kitting out my other setups. However, it has suddenly become apparent that I might have more success if I sent my brother in my place. A big thank you to Logitech for sponsoring the video. Julian joined Massive Entertainment and was involved with the launch of the original Tom Clancy's The Division in 2016. He would then move on to serve as creative director on Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Now, he won't be moving over straight away. He'll be staying in his current role of creative director of Star Wars Outlaws until the title is shipped. In addition to Tom Clancy's The Division 3, Julian will also oversee other projects set in the Tom Clancy's The Division universe, including Division Resurgence and Tom Clancy's Division Heartland. One of Julian's core focuses going into the role will be to build a team for Tom Clancy's The Division 3, while making sure that The Division 2 remains well supported, which as we know have only had a very small team for the last few years. Julian goes on to say that there are only a few games that I can genuinely say blew me away the first time I saw them, and Tom Clancy's The Division is one of them. I was immediately hooked, like so many others who are a part of our devoted player community. It is a privilege and honor to be able to continue to build incredible and unforgettable experiences in this amazing world with the most talented teams around the world, and I can't wait for what's next. We may have over 40 million players, but The Division is still in its early years as a franchise. There are so many more incredible stories to tell, places to explore, and people to protect. We don't know much about The Division 3 at this stage. As I said earlier, Julian is only just starting to build a team. Beyond that, we don't know any more about this other than the fact that it is a sequel. It is likely to be at least 3 or 4 years away. But the game itself isn't necessarily the only thing that has hyped the community. It's the fact that Ubisoft have officially stated that they are continuing to not just support the game, but invest considerably more resources back into its future. Up until now, the future of the Division franchise has been supported by upcoming offshoot titles like Resurgence and Heartland. But this is the first time anything has been said about continuing the core game that a lot of us fell in love with. People like myself who have been around playing these games since early on easily fall into a tunnel vision trap, where we're so passionate about the game that perhaps we're not seeing the larger picture. All it takes is a handful of people to agree with what we're saying, and then suddenly we assume that's what the majority of the community is also thinking. We all wanted to see a Division 3, but none of us had any idea that this was actually going to happen. We were just being hopeful. Thankfully, the higher-ups decided that a further sequel could be justified. So what do I hope gets addressed in The Division 3? Well, my wishlist could probably be a much longer standalone video, but I'll sum up a few bullet points. Let's start with the obvious one. It's 2023. When this game comes out, it could be 2027. I'd like to see features that are commonplace in more recent games to be included in The Division. Most notably, cross-save and cross-play. There is a very obvious reason why we can't have this in The Division 2, and that comes from the foundations the game was built on. I'd love to see this focused on, very early on in the development. Atmosphere. I released a video about 2 years ago titled Why The Division 2 is Better Than The Division. I knew what I was saying here, and I knew it would rile people up, but that never stopped me before. The idea was to show that The Division 2 is a technically and visually superior game to the original, as you would expect from a sequel. However, the overwhelming majority agreed that the atmosphere was a downscale. Not graphically, but the mood and feeling. I'm not ragging on the Division 2 atmosphere, and realistically it only makes sense given the difference in premise between each game. One where everything has just happened and you're trying to survive, and the other where you're trying to rebuild. But this is beside the point. Not everyone cares about the story. However, everyone loves and misses that post-apocalyptic feel. I don't think throwing us straight into the snow again is the answer, but I think heavy consideration around atmosphere and mood needs to be focused on. More meaningful and replayable game modes. I understand that the last few game modes have been released with limited resource, and that not every game mode will be for everyone, but sometimes it feels like there's been no feedback taken on. I'd love to see focus groups of a sort, to discuss certain ideas around the game modes for example, to get player feedback before investing developer support into pushing these through. No, I'm not talking about getting a bunch of content creators together, I mean some actual diehard fans to see what they think. I know we have ETFs from time to time, but it always feels like it's too late by then. Content creators are for media events. They're not necessarily any good for assisting in the future of a game. Remember the tunnel vision thing I talked about earlier? This clouds our judgment. There have only been a handful of content creators that I believe have actually assisted in the development of these games over the last 7 to 8 years, and most have moved on to other things. Last, but certainly not least, I'd like to see them focus on the long game. The Division is a live service game, yet with both the Division 1 and the Division 2, this felt like an afterthought past the first 12 months. I know this is actually more impacted by the higher-ups, well outside of the studio, but don't look at the first few months as an indication of the game's future. Plan, work, fix, innovate. I remember sitting in a room at the old Massive Entertainment building after being presented with Seasons as being the constant trickle of content that the Division 2 will be getting after release. And then turning to the guy sitting next to me, actually that could have been Marco Styles. Anyway, I asked him, is that it? Is that the future content for the game? Now this was before we knew anything about Warlords of New York, but the question still stands. Outside of the one planned DLC, nothing else was ever on the program. Obviously, I personally don't mind Season. They're basically created just for players like me, offering constant updates to the story. But I'll admit, in between each target, I don't really have a lot to do. I'd like to see a more robust forecast of what's coming over the months and even years. It felt like after Warlords of New York that everything just stopped. Until recently, of course. On that note, bring back State of the Game. Don't do it weekly though. Do it monthly or even quarterly. Make it something that should be expected by the community at certain times. It reminds everyone that the game is still being fixed and worked on, but can also be used as a powerful hype tool. If there is a question of what could be featured on the State of the Game, I have a ton of ideas. I don't just mean me doing goofy skits or anything, I mean actual things the community would love to see. However, I think I've prattled on long enough in this video. In summary, The Division 3 has been announced. It's very early days, but we are all super excited. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!